Good afternoon, Talmidim and Talmidot, Opana and Orchaim. Hopefully you had a productive week. Achad Ha'am was once quoted as saying that more than the Jewish people kept the Shabbat, it was the Shabbat that kept the Jewish people. I thought about that comment when I was looking at the beginning of this week's parsha and trying to think of a message to share with you this week. And I really believe that there is no place in the entire Torah, perhaps in the entire Chazal, Gemara, Mishnayos, Midrashim, Rishonim, Achronim, you name it, where there's a greater sense of importance for Shabbos observance than we have right here at the beginning of this week's parsha. Torah tells us, beginning of Vayakhel, that Moshe gathered the Jewish people and he taught them Sheishet Yamim Ta'aseh Malachav Yom Asher Yelachem Kodesh Shabbat Shabbaton Lashem Kol Ha'oseh Bo Malacha Yuma. He taught them the laws of Shabbos, and he started off with Lo Tvar U'esh B'chol Moshvotechem Yom HaShabbat, that you're not supposed to light a fire in your homes on Shabbos. And Rashi, of course, famously writes Sheishet Yamim Hikdim Lohem Azharat Shabbat L'tzivui Mlechet HaMishkan Lomar She'eno Docha Et HaShabbat. That HaKodesh Baruch Hu, in effect, began the commandment to build the Mishkan, to build the tabernacle, with first discussing Shabbos to emphasize that building in the Mishkan is not docha, does not push off the Shabbos. You're not allowed to violate Shabbos even when it comes to building the Mishkan. Now, to me, that's an incredibly powerful lesson. And I want to just put it in perspective. Jewish people have been traveling in the desert. They come, getting close to Eretz Yisrael, and God, in effect, tells them through Moshe that it's time to build me a home, right? You're going to build me this tabernacle, you're going to build me this Mishkan. And we saw already Parsha, Truma, and Tetzaveh, the buildup of the collections associated with building this Mishkan. We saw Kitisa, the Chet HaEgel, devastating event that happened in the context of the precursor, perhaps, to building the Mishkan, and now we're ready to build. Vayakhel-Pekudei is all about building, and God says, wait, stop. 6 days you should work. You should work hard. You should be productive. Give it your all. Put every ounce of energy you have into working, building, constructing, living productive lives. But on Shabbos, we stop. And God, in effect, said there are no exceptions to the rule. Meaning, even an activity as sacred and as holy as building my own home, Shabbos takes precedence. Shabbos is above it. Shabbos is such an incredibly important day that I don't want you to build me a house on Shabbos. HaKodesh Baruch Hu very easily could have said that's an exception to the rule. We know we have a concept of a chai bohem, that if ever there would be a suffix, a doubt of loss of life, you're supposed to violate Shabbos. Happens often in life. Happens in Israel and the Israeli army all the time. That the idea of safety, security, and loss of life overrides Shabbos. There are exceptions to the rule in the context of Shabbos observance. And if HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to, God could have said, you know what? The building of the Mishkan is so essential, is so time sensitive, it has to happen, that you know what? I'm going to allow you to violate Shabbos in order to build my house. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu was sending a message. And that message is that even something as important as building my own home where my Shekhinah will reside is not more important than Shabbos. And I mention this because I think that Shabbos is one of those mitzvot, when fully observed properly, that's really complicated and really challenging, not just for those of us collectively in high school, speaking of course to a high school audience primarily, but to adults as well. People, those of you who are in my Hilchot Shabbat class will know that we talk about whether or not Shabbos is supposed to be the first day of the week or the last day of the week. Right? Obviously, from a creation perspective, it's the last day of the week. 6 days of creation that happened prior to this final day of Shabbos. But from the perspective of Adam and Chava, from the perspective of man and woman, who were created on that last day, Shabbos is the first day of the week. And there are lots of, perhaps I would say, practical, nafkaminot in thought as to how we think about it and how we approach Shabbos. But I just want to leave you with the idea that every once in a while we have to stop and think about how we observe Shabbos and how important Shabbos is to us and whether or not we can make it meaningful. I had a friend of mine who once told me that he had a congregant who was incredibly addicted to cigarette smoking, and literally walked in his house and he had a cigarette going almost in every room in the house so that he could put it down and then continue in the next room. And it was an addictive habit. He once asked that person, I don't understand, what do you do on Shabbos? And the individual said, I would never smoke on Shabbos. Are you kidding me? Never in a million years. And he said, well, how are you able to manage that? Look at the way in which you act during the rest of the week. And he said, Rabbi, Shabbos is Shabbos. Shabbos is special. And there was an idea that I have to perhaps recognize that Shabbos has to rise above all else. Certainly something to think about. We all need that level of strength, I would say, to recommit ourselves to a more meaningful Shabbos observance. Thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.